Hello, everyone, and welcome to the SQAforums webinar hosted by SmartBear Software, who's a longtime sponsor of SQAforums. Today, you will learn from Sergey Sokolov, Steve Miller, and Nick Olivo tips and tricks on overcoming 6 common testing challenges. During the webinar, please make sure you pay attention to the chat window on your control panel. There, I will give you instructions on how to win SQAforums apparel and goodies. There will be 3 chances to win during the webinar, so pay attention to the messages I send. So stay tuned, and Sergey, please take it away.
Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our webinar on overcoming 6 common testing challenges. Very pleased to introduce 2 really smart bears, colleagues of mine, Steve Miller and Nick Olivo, who are our respective solution experts at SmartBear Software. Steve is a Vice President of ALM Solutions, previously the President of Pragmatic Software, the company SmartBear merged with a couple of years ago. Nick, Nick kind of defies categorization. We call Nick the TestComplete Superman. After becoming a super user of TestComplete at his previous company, Nick joined SmartBear about 4 years ago and now is the total expert, as he is, helping both prospects and customers get the most out of TestComplete to set them up with automated testing. So this is generally what we're going to talk about. We will focus on hopefully familiar to everybody pains of testing. Before we extend our opinion about what they are, we'll speak a little bit about who or what is SmartBear so that we gain some credibility in your eyes. We'll then dive into the details about the 6 common testing challenges and solutions as we as SmartBear offer those to customers. I hope you didn't expect something else entirely out of this webinar. As they say, this flight is departing to Anchorage, Alaska, and if you are heading to Miami, this is the time to get off the plane. Everybody still with us? Great. Nick, Steve, and I will take turns to present. We will talk about a couple of common testing pains each. We will summarize after that and go to Q&A. Hope you ask at least some of the tough questions, and we'll provide some of the clear answers. And then we're going to have a Twitter after party. There's going to be a Twitter bash. We're going to send the hash code after that. During the webinar. And as far as what if we didn't cover what you were mostly concerned about, you can ask questions using the questions feature in your GoToWebinar panel. We'll respond to those to the extent we have time at the end. And for those whose questions haven't been answered, join us on Twitter with the hashtag HPAlternatives. And if your pain is that right before the webinar, your boss came over and told you to go and do some emergency testing, don't worry. We'll post the replay of the webinar in its entirety on smartbear.com. It also will be available to all registered attendees. So who is SmartBear? Well, we are a software company. We make great tools which are used by thousands and tens of thousands in the field. Among those tools are TestComplete for automated testing, QAComplete for test management, SoapUI Pro for API and web services testing, and then a number of others for peer code review, lifecycle application management, performance profiling, load testing, web monitoring, and so forth. We are proud to say that these tools are built by users for the users. We have a lot of people on staff who were developers, testers, and managers, so they have direct input into what and how we make the tools. All our tools have open free trials, so it's always free to try. And we're very proud of our top-notch customer support that's available even with trials. So if any of these sound familiar, you've come to the right place. Well, everybody says setting up automated testing should be easy, right? Well, right. More often than not, it's actually somewhat a pain because no two applications are created equal, and it seems no two releases are created equal either. So the challenges with automating testing, despite all the claims to the country, are there. Some of them relate to complex systems. The systems that require multiple tests to be exercised, where you need to run one test on one machine, then a follow-up to that on another machine, and then pull together the results and the logs. And many tools just aren't set up to do that. Even if you've managed to do that, very frequently only a select set of people has visibility into what the results were, whether it's because of the team organization, whether it's because of the tools, or whether it's because of browsers that some tools don't support. A significant factor in testing being a pain is not being able to use the right tool. The tool you have at the enterprise may not support the technology or not support the technology well, and then you have to go through various hoops to actually get it to work and deliver the results, sometimes amounting to just doing everything by hand. What that leads to, well, unfortunately, we've all seen that. We need to spend another late night at the office. Obviously, we all want to live normal lives, testers or not, and automation is supposed to be helpful. So now we are going to take up a few of the pains and detail as far as how we can actually Tylenol them away. Well, let's start with setting up automated testing. Nick, it's over to you.
All right. Thanks very much, Sergey. Hello, everyone. And Sergey asked me to talk today about a couple of the most common pains that folks are going to encounter during the course of their test efforts. And the first one is that setting up automated testing can be a slow and complex process. You see, one of the great strengths of a QA team is its diverse background. You're going to have people from all walks of life testing software, and that's good because each person brings a different perspective to the table while testing. But the downside here is that each user has a different comfort level when it comes to test automation. And if you've been doing automation for any length of time, you know that there are some people out there who just don't have the needed skills to automate effectively. And as such, automation above and beyond simple record and replay may be out of their reach. Even if your team's automation power user builds reusable function libraries that can handle very sophisticated tasks, a non-technical person may not fully understand how to use those functions effectively, and that's going to hold them back and keep them from automating. And because of that, more work falls back on the automation power user, either because they have to take up the slack or because they have to spend more time re-explaining how to call a function or which function to use in a given situation. So QAComplete, our automated testing tool, solves this problem via a feature called extensions. These allow you to leverage a power user's knowledge by turning complicated function calls into wizards via QAComplete's built-in tool set. The end result is that you can enable non-technical users to do things that they normally wouldn't be able to do, and this has the added benefit of freeing up bandwidth on the team's power user because now they don't have to spend their time re-explaining things. So I'd like to take a few minutes and show you an example of how these extensions look like and what they can do. So I'm going to jump out of PowerPoint here. I've already got our automated tool, QAComplete, loaded up here, and this is the code that I would normally have to write in order to do a complicated action like verify data inside the Windows registry. You know, if you guys have ever tried to automate working with the registry before, you know what an absolutely terrifying experience that can be, because if you make one wrong move in the registry, you can mess up your entire system. So To help with that, you may create some reusable functions that people can use, like what I've done here. But the challenge is people then still need to remember where that function lives. They need to remember the proper syntax to include the function when they want to call it. And then even when calling the function, as you can see here, they need to remember things like the appropriate syntax, how to escape various strings and whatnot. And so this may be off-putting to users who don't have a coding background. So let's take a look at this exact same code but turned into an extension. And now instead of verifying the registry via script, I'm going to verify the registry via this simple little wizard. And everything that you see right here, this form, all the controls within it, and the code that lives behind it is actually built right inside of TestComplete, so I don't need any other tools. And now, instead of relying on my user to remember the string HKey, LM, control, / whatever, I just say, okay, run regedit, select the key that you care about, like maybe we want to verify this application's path key. All right, we say select key, and now TestComplete is going to read in that key, tell us the expected key, the expected value, we say okay, and that's it. And now when this runs, TestComplete will look in the registry, it will say, does this key contain that value? If it does, fantastic, we put a success message out in our log file. If it doesn't, we put an error that contains what we were looking for and what we actually found. So we've taken something that would normally require a lot of coding or in-depth knowledge, and we've turned it into something that anybody can use. So as a power user, you can build that extension, give it to everybody on your team. It then becomes part of the TestComplete install, like right here. It shows up right inside their checkpoint palette. They don't need to remember any special code to call it. They don't need to remember how to format strings. They don't need to remember, the appropriate syntax to include things. Now it's just a matter of dropping it onto the form, clicking 3 buttons, and they're done. So this is a really great way to help make test setup a whole lot easier and faster throughout the course of your testing. Now another common pain that comes up in testing teams is that you can't run dependent tests in different environments. In some cases you may need to purchase an entirely separate product, or you need to cobble together some convoluted shell scripts in order to run tests in this fashion. It would be nice if you could just say run everywhere and have your tests kick off on all the selected environments, but you really can't do that. It's extremely difficult to coordinate tests to run together as well. So let's say you've got 2 systems, and System 1 is going to enter transactions, and System 2 is going to approve those transactions. Ideally what would happen is System 1 would enter a transaction, System 2 would approve it, and then they'd back and forth until they were done. But coordinating that could be a very involved process. And then you'd need to figure out some way to gather up all the results from each of the systems that's participating in that test and store them in a convenient location. Now lots of teams have implemented scenarios like this, but it's a pretty involved and convoluted process. So the solution here is a feature called distributed testing. This allows users to have a single central system that orchestrates and coordinates what tests get run on what systems and when. These machines can be in your lab, they can be virtual machines, they can even be systems living out in the cloud. And as those tests run, users get a remote desktop window into each system participating in the test, allowing them to keep tabs on the test progress, and then finally, once the tests are finished, all the results get copied back to that orchestrating test system, which allows you to easily review the test results and determine the cause of any failures. So I'd like to take another couple of minutes and show you how that looks. So again, we're going to come back into TestComplete here, and TestComplete's capability to do this is called a network suite. And what this allows you to do is start out by defining those systems that will participate in your test. So here I've got 2 virtual machines that are out on my network, and I've filled in the names of those systems, and I've also set up TestComplete so that it will automatically log on to those systems. I've put in the appropriate credentials in order to log in there. Once you've got your systems defined, you can create what are called jobs. And jobs are just collections of tests that will be run on those remote systems. So here you can see I've got 2 tasks inside my job here. I'm going to start out by loading orders on this particular system, and then I'm going to process the orders on the second system. And now to run this, all I have to do is right-click on the job and say run. And now Test Complete's going to call out to both those systems. You're going to see some data pop up on my screen here. You'll see a remote desktop window on the right-hand side of my screen for each one of those systems, and we'll be able to keep tabs on whether or not the tests are running properly. As the tests run, we can keep tabs on their status via the state column here. So I can see right now that both my tests are currently running, and now I see that my top test has finished out. It's stopping. My bottom test is still entering in some data, and now it's finishing out. It's copying its results back to me. And when the tests finish, Test Complete switches gears, and it shows me this gathered up log file that tells us each one of the systems that participated in the test. So we had 2 tasks that ran, and they were both successful. And now here's my test from system number 2. I can see that one. And I can drill in, and I can see all the steps that it performed on that system. And then I can come over here, and I can see all the steps that were performed on my order placement system. So now, if I had 10 or 15 tests that I wanted to coordinate across multiple environments, I could set them all up right here and run them, keep tabs on their status, and analyze all the results, all from the comfort of my own cube. This way I don't have to get up, run all over the office, and pull data files, put them onto appropriate network location. Everything is gathered right here for me. So distributed testing and network suites make it much easier for you to coordinate those very complicated and convoluted scenarios into a much more cohesive package. All right, so now to turn things over to Steve Miller, who's going to talk to you about the next panes in the process.
All right, thanks a lot, Nick. That network testing is really cool, by the way. All right, so now let's talk about best practices for automated testing. One of the things that we want to address here from our pane is if you're doing all of that running in the background, many times you don't have visibility to show all of that run activity to others on your team. So let's say that we develop some automated tests and we set them up to run with each build. Well, that's good, but what types of pitfalls can we really run into? One of the pitfalls that we can run into here is that the automated tester really is the only person that can see the automated test results. But if we had a perfect world, anytime an automated test was run, our entire team would be able to see what was run, what passed, and then what failed. Now, if your team has a test lab set up, very similar to what Nick was just showing you a minute ago, most likely with different test lab machines, it's also important to easily find out what automated tests have been run on each one of those lab machines. For example, it'd be really cool if you were able to know that code changes that were committed caused an issue on a specific operating system or browser configuration. Now, another painful point for automated tests is setting them up to run at specific dates and times. Once you've taken all the effort to create your automated tests, it would be really ideal if you could easily schedule them to run on specific lab machines at specific dates and at specific times. Finally, when you're working on a specific release, it would be really important to know how many automated tests as well as manual tests have been run, and this will provide you a much better understanding of the type of test coverage that you have. All right, so what's the solution to providing a much better visibility of your automated tests and your manual runs? Well, the solution really revolves around giving your team visibility to both your automated as well as your manual test runs. And if you're able to do that in a browser, that makes it even easier for people because most people have access to their browser. Better yet, it'd also be better if you could run it regardless of what type of browser you use. I know that there's some other tools on the market that only work with Internet Explorer, for example. So it'd be really cool if you had that visibility regardless if you were using Internet Explorer, Firefox, Google Chrome, Safari, whatever your favorite browser is. So that's one of the things that would be an ideal solution. Now, the solution that you use from a browser perspective also should allow you to be able to quickly schedule your automated tests without doing any real messy scripting or command files or anything like that. It should just be built into your browser solution and allow you to schedule those out without any of those hassles. Finally, the browser solution that you choose should also allow you to visually see all of your test runs in some type of graphical format. If you're able to see them on a dashboard or report, that would be absolutely ideal. Okay, so how could all of this work? Well, one of the solutions that we provide is a tool called QAComplete, and it integrates really nicely with the Test Complete tool that Nick showed you earlier. All you really have to do is you download a little plug-in, and then those two tools work really nice seamlessly together. Okay, so what would that look like? Well, if you log into QAComplete, which we're showing here, you'll notice that in the QAComplete solution, there's this area here called automation. And in that automation area, you can come here and very easily see what automated test runs have happened against specific machines or hosts. In fact, I can see this SM Precision machine here that we've run one test today. I can see that it's passed. I can see how many tests were inside of it. I could even look at the duration, how long each one of those took to run. If I wanted to see what ran yesterday, I can see that we actually had two runs here. We had one that passed and one that failed. Now, the other cool thing about this, too, is Nick was showing you earlier how you can run a series of tests, right? And with each one of those tests that you run, you can actually look at a log file that will tell you specifically what passed and what failed. Well, one of the really interesting features here is for any of these runs that you do, you can simply click on the run activity and it'll take you directly into that log file so that you can look at the details of that particular log. So that's one of the nice little features here, is that you can come in, look at any particular test that's run. You can see step by step what actually happened. We can see here that this did a file open. It even uses the Test Complete's visualizer that will show you what the screen looked like when you were actually running the test. So that's one of the interesting features there. Now, we also talked about the fact that not only is it important to be able to see that run activity, it's also important to be able to schedule tests from this browser-based solution here, because if you've ever worked with some of the other automated tools, a lot of times you have to create a whole bunch of scripts and really messy command line type procedures. Well, we've simplified that for you. Notice here in QAComplete, there's an automation scheduler. And if I go to this automation scheduler, I can simply come in here and click Add, and I can choose to add a schedule for Test Complete. I can choose a project, and then I can choose from that project what time I want it to run. So let's say that I wanted to run a full regression tonight at 9 p.m. I can also, while I'm at it, go ahead and set this up to run every day of the week. So I can come here and choose specific days that I want this to run. Now, the real key advantage here is, again, I don't have to write any of that messy scripting. I can easily come in here and set this to run on any machine that's running Test Complete or Test Execute. And because it's browser-based, I don't have to have a VPN connection back into my office, any of that kind of thing. I can do it securely from my home with no problems there. Now, one of the other things that we talked a little bit about earlier was being able to see all of that run activity graphically, okay? And that's what this allows us to do. So I can come in here and I can look at my manual test runs here. I can see what browsers they're running under, how many passed, how many are failed. I can look at all of my test runs linked back to a specific requirement. And lo and behold, here are all of the automated tests that have run day by day, showing me clearly how many have passed, how many have failed, and all of that information is just right there, nicely aggregated together for us. Okay, so let's take a look now at the next pane. All right, so the next pane is, how do we know if we have enough coverage when it comes to designing our tests for a specific release? Well, let's face it, anytime you're writing new code for a release, the possibility of breaking an existing feature exists. I mean, it just does. So we need to be able to have some way to mitigate that risk. You know, also when we're working with new features that we're implementing in a release, we also need to feel comfortable that we've created enough test cases to fully test the features that we're delivering in that new release. And that should include both positive and negative tests. Now, once we have enough automated and manual tests, it's also important, equally important, that everybody on the team has visibility to what tests have been created, what tests have been run, how many have passed, and then how many have failed. And then finally, once we begin our testing, it's also important to ensure that all the defects that are found during the testing process get fixed in a timely manner. So if you're using email or some other communication like that to report defects, you know how risky that is. It's just defects can get lost in the shuffle and they just don't get fixed before you get into production, and that can cause you some support issues once you get there. So what's the solution for this? You know, how do we ensure that we have enough test coverage and that all of the critical defects get fixed? Well, if you follow Nick's advice, you'll be creating automated tests that you can run on each one of your builds that you do. And these tests will notify you if you broke any of your existing functionality. So that's one thing you can do. Next, for any new features that you're working on in a specific release, you'll also need a way of linking those tests back to the requirement to ensure that you have enough positive and negative tests that are going to fully test each one of those features that you're implementing in your release. That process is called traceability, and it's really critical to ensure that you have enough test cases that cover that traceability for each one of your requirements. Now, as you begin your testing, you're going to be sure to log all your defects, and it's really good to place those in a central repository so that both your testers and your developers can access those defects and get that visibility they need. So even better, you know, if you use a tool that automatically sends email alerts, for example, to developers as you create defects as they're assigned to them, and then once those defects are fixed by the developers, if it had a way to alert the tester that that defect had been fixed, you're even better off there. Now finally, once all of your defects are logged, you probably want to keep an eye on the number of defects that are generated. You'll want to look at that daily, and you'll want to ensure that none of those defects get stale. If your defect tracking solution has some way to do escalations, in other words, figure out what defects are getting old and send you an email, all the better. All right? Okay, so what I've done so far is I've shown you talked about how you can utilize tools to help you manage your requirements, how you can get better traceability back to the test management solution, and how you can track those defects. So what tools do we offer to help you do that? Well, QAComplete absolutely allows you to do that, and I'll go through this very quickly. One of the things that you can do with QAComplete is you can define your releases. Notice that we have this little releases tab. So you're probably going to be working on a number of different tools within your organization that you're developing. So for each one of those product lines, you can break those product lines down into specific releases. And if you're doing Agile development, you can even break a release down into Agile sprints. And notice for each one of these Agile sprints, you can allocate specific requirements that you're going to be servicing in that particular sprint. You can also see here that you can define tests against those requirements, which will be shown here as well. And then, of course, when you begin doing defect tracking, you'll be able to see all of your defects here as well. Now, again, whenever you're defining your requirements, it's important when you define your requirements, let's say that I'm defining the ones for Sprint 1 of this release, that you can see those very easily from your test management tool. And for any one of these requirements, it's also important to be able to drill down into that information and look at all of the tests that have been allocated to a specific requirement. If you want to take it a step further, it's good to have a traceability report. And that traceability report should be able to look holistically at a specific requirement, show you how many defects have been generated against that requirement, show you how many tests have been linked up to that requirement, and in what state those tests are in as well. When you're looking at your test library, it's important to have a central repository where you can store those tests and be able to reuse those from release to release. It's important to also be able to define different configurations, because we all know that we have to support mobile in a lot of ways. We have to support different browsers and operating systems, so it's important to be able to define those configurations. All right, and then as you begin your testing cycle, it's important to be able to group a set of tests together and run those for a specific release under those different configurations. For example, if I go here and I look at Sprint 1 that we're working on here for this particular release, and I look at any of these test sets, you can define your test sets here, and you can define all of the tests that are a part of that test set. You can even go into here and choose what releases you're going to run them under, and then what configurations you're going to run. And then as you run those tests, you can automatically generate defects that will show up here in your defect tracking solution. And of course, you can get all kind of analytics here that will show you how fast you're getting through all of that defect management. One of the things that QAComplete also allows you to do is to set escalation rules. And those escalation rules will allow you to quickly find any defects that are getting stale. So those are all the kinds of things that you want to be looking at whenever you're doing your test management, both from an automated perspective as well as a manual perspective. All right, well, that kind of covers my section of this. We'll now turn it over to Sergey to take you next to the next pane here.
Thank you, Steve. Well, with all these advanced capabilities, I'm sure some folks can't help but ask this question, well, I can't really use the right tool for the job. And there can be basically two situations that we encounter more frequently than others. They're kind of on the two ends of the spectrum. And one we'll call the enterprise solution, which typically is one massive set of tools from one vendor. And that set of tools tends to be somewhat expensive. It includes a wide array of tools, pretty much just short of a coffee maker. And some of those you might need, and some just come as part of the package. And of course, what happens is those tools are forced on you because they were in the package. You didn't select them. You just end up using them no matter what. These suites frequently require full-time administrators, which is kind of unfortunate because anything advanced seems to require scripting, and very few people can actually do that in a reasonable time. Cost has also a disadvantage that frequently people cannot get enough licenses that requires them to be productive. Test teams tend to be under-equipped with test tools or plugins, and as a result, testing certain applications or technologies becomes a challenge. On the other end of the spectrum is a hodgepodge of free open source tools in Microsoft Office. Yes, it's free to acquire, but it doesn't seem like it's free to use because they are different tools. They are not necessarily meant to be scalable. The pieces don't talk to each other. And in the end, what happens is there's too much effort required to maintain and trace. But at the same time, the initial advantage of, oh, we can get these tools for free, seems to have caused or influenced the decision. Well, what can be a solution for that? Well, I think at the core of the solution, we would like to see that whoever uses the tools chooses the tools, so there's the power of the user. The key here is to recognize that, well, of course, there's more than one vendor, and with more than one vendor out there, there quite possibly is a best-of-breed solution that combines offerings from multiple. There certainly is a middle ground between conglomerates of tools from one vendor and the free offerings, which are excellent tools, highly capable, not too expensive, and very deployable. You should consider, obviously, when selecting a tool, the technology roadmap, both of your own enterprise and the vendor that you're selecting, because time and again, we see that the development technologies advance faster than test tools, and in some cases substantially faster than some test tools. So it may take up to a year for certain vendors to support as much as Firefox 4. And I can't even remember when that was released. With heterogeneous tools, integration points become important, but fortunately many tools, and SmartBear tools included, have a lot of integrations with existing tools, whether those are Quality Center, the popular Jira, open source Subversion, or many others. And we also have extensibility built in so that we can easily build the interfaces for the systems that customer has. Well, in some sense, all testing comes down to cost. And it used to be an old adage that, well, if we need to save cost, then we'll just eliminate testing, whether it's schedule-wise, budget-wise, or resource-wise. Of course, one aspect is that test tools are expensive, some of them, and an alternative used to be, well, let's just test it by hand. That obviously doesn't solve the problem because manual effort may be just as expensive, particularly if it needs to be repeated. Testing once is fine, but you frequently need to do it 2, 3, 4, 7 times in the span of a week as fixes accumulate, and then it's no longer economical. With some industries, testing is mandated, so they just absorb the expense, but obviously that reflects on the bottom line. With the added expense of testing, cost effectiveness is a major issue. And of course, there would be reluctance to spend big bucks on test tools without a guaranteed ROI, and there is no such thing as a guaranteed ROI. Further, there's a background scenario where if you invest too much in a given vendor and the solution doesn't prove to be valuable, then that could pretty much can somebody's career, which nobody is looking forward to. More sophisticated tools or more complex tools obviously need more skilled resources or certified engineers that will drive up the cost of testing as well. There, of course, is personal cost, which frequently comes from, well, we need to stay one more late night in the office to finish this testing. One solution to this is, of course, try before you buy. It's easy to explore more affordable solutions, given that there are many of them out there. You can prove that a given tool works for your technology before you battle it out with sales or your own boss. So you have all the ammunition to make the case. So you can show value from a proof of concept to simplify the executive buy-in. And the scenarios of proofs of concept can be complicated. So support during that period is very important. So make sure that the vendor you work with provides support during trials as much as they do with the purchased tools. SmartBear does it 100%. So now we've presented all that yummy material. So what can you actually do with it? Well, there are a number of scenarios that will present you natural opportunities to compare the tools of different vendors. Then don't just take our word for it. Put our tools side by side with the best you have and see what comes out on top. After all, the trial is free, and it wouldn't take much time to set the SmartBear tools up. The technology field is changing faster than ever, and obviously you want the test tools to stay in step. New browsers come out almost every month these days, and obviously if you have a web application, you need to be able to ensure it's compatible with the latest versions. So you may have a technology point that your current tool set just doesn't seem to support, and that's a good cause to look at some other tools. If you need to test a Flex application, which seem to be used in enterprise contexts more and more these days, right up out of the gate without writing additional test API code that, for example, QTP requires, you can try out QAComplete. If you need to provide everybody on the team, developers, testers, and management, with uniform view into manual and automated test coverage, try out QAComplete. If you need to set up a simple load test, don't want to write hen scripts or deal with megabucks installation, try our load complete instead of load runner. If you're dealing with web services and need to mock up some parts of the system on the cheap, we have SoapUI Pro. So give SmartBear a try. The trial is always free. So now we've come to the most entertaining portion of the whole presentation, your questions. I've seen there are a number of questions that have already come in. I'm sure that almost any section caused some thought, and we encourage you to ask us anything that will pertain to your business, your problems, your technologies, and we hope to provide you with some answers and technical solutions. So there are already some questions, as I said, that have come in. See, Nick, there was a, just navigate to the right place. There were a couple of questions about extensions. Vladimir asked whether extensions are predefined or they can be created by power users. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. So extensions are created primarily by power users. We do have some predefined extensions that ship with QAComplete, and there are others that are available for download off of our website, one of those being the registry checkpoint that I showed during the course of the session. But typically, the extensions themselves are created by someone who has a coding background, and then they're distributed out to everybody else in the team so that they can take advantage of that.
Thank you. Regarding the network testing, what are network requirements for network tests? Are they constrained to the same geographic location, or can they be run anywhere as long as there is a VPN?
As long as there's a VPN, QAComplete can call out to that remote system. So if you've got an office in Boston and an office in Shanghai, and they are connected via VPN, then you'll be able to use systems from both offices in a distributed test.
Thank you. There were a couple of questions from Elaine that referred to this product. Would this product be good with new development, or it should be with maintenance and enhancement development? Since we're not sure which product of the two we showed that really applies to, but it was asked during the time that Steve was presenting, I would direct that question to him.
Okay. Yeah, Lane. If the question is, is it a good idea to use a test management solution when you're just getting started with the development of a new product, or is it better to wait until the product's been put into production and gets a little bit more mature? My answer to that would be you really want to get started as early as possible, because if you can go in and you can create some good processes around that, get into the habit of defining your requirements and having a place that everybody can see those requirements and approve them, build a set of tests around that. Those tests that you create at that process would be able to be converted into regression tests later on. And then as you mature, you can take those manual tests, convert those right on into automated tests, and you won't have to go through the rigor of running those manually. You can just put them on automation.
Thank you, Steve. Well, there's one that goes right to the bone of it. What are the benefits of QAComplete over, well, it's actually not quite the right, I guess, mix. The question is asked by Dennis is, what are the benefits of QAComplete over HP QuickTest Pro? I presume that would actually read what are the benefits of QAComplete versus Quality Center. Steve, would you mind?
Yeah, I'll take that.
Yeah,
we can also talk
taking that one?
Absolutely, I'd be happy to. And we can also ask Nick to chime in on how TestComplete compares to QuickTest Pro as well. So let's first talk about QAComplete versus HP Quality Center, or their new ALM suite, right? And one of the primary benefits with QAComplete is that it works on any browser. So you can use QAComplete on Internet Explorer. You can use it with Firefox, with Chrome, with even Safari. And for those of you that have used Quality Center in the past, you know that you're kind of locked into IE only. One of the other benefits, too, is that I think that you saw today how graphical QAComplete is and how easy it is to find dashboards and reports. And it has I think, a much better run engine where you can very easily generate defects as you're running a test. If it fails, you can easily create a defect from it. And then finally, the big elephant in the room is, how is the cost different? Well, QAComplete is about a fifth of the cost of HP Quality Center. Yeah, I didn't misspeak there. I said a fifth, about a fifth the cost. Okay, so that's a big difference in the two tools. Now, I'll turn it over to Nick and let him talk about the differences between TestComplete and QuickTest Pro.
All right, thanks, Steve. Yeah, there's a couple of differences right out of the gate between TestComplete and QTP, and the couple of those are, for starters, we support 5 different scripting languages. QTP only has the one, so we have VB script, J script, Delphi script, C# script, and C++ script. We also have superior object recognition, so TestComplete supports a boatload of different types of controls right out of the box, and even for those that we don't necessarily provide direct support for, if there's a brand new company that just releases a new tree control, for example, we may not be able to record working against that directly, but we can programmatically manipulate it, so you're never left out in the cold as far as those kinds of things go. Other things to talk about, obviously extensions are something that QTP doesn't have. Distributed testing, like we saw earlier, isn't something that it has. Also, we have a runtime license called Test Execute, so that allows you to run tests on systems that don't need a full automation license. In fact, you can put that Test Execute license on as many systems on your network as you want. It's a concurrent license, so you have 10 licenses of it. You can install it in 1,000 places, and then run 10 at a time. And then finally, like Steve said, the cost. TestComplete is about the quarter of a cost of a QTP license, so it's actually possible to outfit an entire team of testers with TestComplete as opposed to what it would cost one license of QuickTest Pro. So those are the high-level items that you might want to consider there.
Thank you, Nick. There were a number of questions related to cost, and of course, particularly given our emphasis at the end of the presentation on an aspect, we also believe that it's a very interesting topic, but costs will differ depending on configurations, the packaging of tools and so forth. So the best way to actually get any specific answers would be to contact SmartBear through the website. There's a Contact Us option on the front page, and that will put you in touch with a sales rep, and they will be able to answer many of the questions. We do publish our list prices on the web, so for any product you can go and look it up, and you can also even buy tools from our tools from the web as well. There were also a group of questions regarding integration points. There were some specific systems that were mentioned, like Jira. And Steve, I'd like you to elaborate a little bit on that somewhat later. There were questions about whether our tools offer APIs for integration. And the answer is yes, both tools that we showed, TestComplete and QAComplete, offer APIs. TestComplete API is in COM, so you can basically write scripts against that and use that in your automation. And Steve, as I recall, QAComplete has web service interface that you can also utilize to establish connections with third-party systems.
Yeah, and I'd like to, it'd probably be interesting just to quickly show you how our integrations work. I can do that in about 2 minutes if you guys are interested in seeing that. I could show you how we can integrate with Jira very seamlessly. We have a number of different integrations that kind of come out of the box at no additional cost with our tool. You can integrate with Jira, with Bugzilla, with HP Quality Center, a lot of those different tools out there. And here's just an example. You're looking at QAComplete right now, and we're over here in the defect tracking area. Notice that I have some defects here, but if I open up one of these defects, notice that I've set that up to automatically sync with Jira. And all it was we have an integration tool called Ops Hub. You install that, you configure the integration, and it's off and running. It can do both a one-way integration as well as a two-way integration. In other words, you can create defects here, it can ship them over to Jira, you can create them in Jira, it can ship them back here, you can update them on either side, it has conflict resolution, all that kind of stuff. And then if you want to access that item directly from within QAComplete and open up Jira, it's just a single click and it'll bring that item right up. So it's very, very simple to set that up over in here. One of the other questions that I saw coming in that was a little related to this is that, well, hey, look, I have a number of test cases over in Excel. Is there an easy way to pull those test cases into QAComplete? And the answer to that is absolutely. You just go in here in your test library. You click on Actions. You click on Import from an Excel spreadsheet. You choose that from your hard drive, and it takes you through a little mapping wizard that'll map those fields out. It's that easy to get that data in there. And then finally, somebody had asked, okay, well, typically if I'm looking at QAComplete from a cost perspective, what would it cost if we, let's say, had 10 users of QAComplete? And Sergey said, well, it depends on what model you're looking at, because we do offer a software as a service where we can host it for you. That the cost of that is $399 per user per year, so you're looking at 10 concurrent users for about $3,990 a year. Pretty inexpensive. If you need it installed locally in your own organization and be able to run it from your own servers, we offer an on-premises edition. It's $899 per user. That's a one-time fee. Yeah, so 10 users would be $8,990, just to give you an idea.
Thanks, Steve. Let's see, there was, which one should we go to next? Okay. Steve, I think it's going to go back to you. Is there a transition from HP Quality Center to QAComplete or ALMcomplete, and how complex is that?
Oh, that's a very good question. Yeah, we really tried to give you an easy on-ramp for getting out of Quality Center and getting into QAComplete or ALMcomplete. We offer an HP conversion tool, and the cost of that tool is a one-time fee of $3,000. One of our partners built that tool. They've done a really good job with it, and it's really extensive. It'll do things like it'll create all the folder structures. So if you were to have a folder structure that you built in Quality Center, it'll bring that same folder structure up over in QAComplete, for example. It'll convert all your requirements. It'll convert all of your tests. It'll convert all of your defects. It'll even set up users. If you've got users set up in Quality Center and you want to bring those over into the tool, it can bring those over as well. It can set up custom fields and choice lists, all those things. It's really, really robust. It's a pretty impressive tool.
Thank you, Steve. Let's see, what else do we have here? There was one licensing question regarding virtual machines. I can find that. Where did it disappear? The transition. Well, while I am looking for this one, do we provide tutorials or training? Yes, we provide both. One of our signature approaches is that we post a lot of material on our website, both in articles and videos. And that applies to TestComplete and QAComplete, both of them. So not only are you able to sort of get an idea of what the tools do, but there are specific short videos covering specific technical or application aspects of all of our tools. So if you go to smartbear.com, then you'll find all of that material at your fingertips, and you're free to share that with your colleagues. We also have our YouTube channel. So if you search for SmartBear on YouTube, you'll find videos there as well. Okay, that's an interesting question. How can I prove proof of concept for a small company with a QA test team of 2? Is there a way to justify cost to purchase? We have a lot of customers with small teams who found very advantageous to use test automation. As a matter of fact, I just talked to a team last week. They use TestComplete to test a very complex Flex application. There are 2 folks involved. They utilize some others in the role of business analysts to create the tests. But they were very happy, and it seems like the investment worked very well for them to automate the tests. They have some compliance requirements, so they do need to do testing, but obviously TestComplete allowed them to do that very effectively. But I think the first step in getting the proof of concept going would be to sign up for a trial and see where it takes you. Scripting languages in TestComplete, I think Nick covered that. That's 5 scripting languages. Most commonly used are VBScript and JScript. Okay, I'm actually being reminded that it's now the top of the hour. We need to wrap up the webinar and invite everybody to join us in the Twitter forum with #HPAlternatives. It seemed that the Twitter API had some problems just recently, but I guess the news is that it has been repaired. Right, the hashtag, okay, the hashtag that's shown at this slide is wrong. The one you want to use is #HPAlternatives. So thank you very much for being here with us. We were glad to have you. We hope that you join us for the Twitter after party. Thanks again. We're going to wrap up the webinar now.